So here it is. This is sold by a company called Blue Foam. Just as one word, the bigger sizes are actually this grey-black rather than blue. It's a good job that I didn't want it, need it pristine, because it's got quite a few knocks out of it, and I don't know whether or not that's thanks to my Hermes, or whether or not that's happened because it's come across the Irish Sea. Blue Foam are located in Northern Ireland. And to cut it, I bought one of these. Now, the people working with this stuff regularly they use a thing called a Proxon hot wire table, or they make their own hot wire tables, and it's just something that looks a little bit like a fret saw, or a fret saw, a bandsaw, but it's a wire, and it's heated, and you can change the voltages. It's an expensive thing, but I've deliberately avoided that, and I've deliberately avoided investing in one of those or making one of those, because they are designed to approximate a carpentry tool. They're designed to give you straight, regular lines and precise angles and things. And I want to deliberately force myself not to do that, to stay organic. This is here it says a styrofoam cutting pen, but it's actually they're usually called hot cutting knives. And this is only 10 centimetre long, which is not quite as long as that is thick, which might cause a problem, but the 20 centimetre long ones are really expensive. Problem with this, big problem, is that this cost me £45, which is a lot of money when it's the alternative to trying to work with cardboard or plaster or all sorts of other things that I could have worked with, and I'm not sure. Right, let's pretend that my camera didn't just run out of memory and power off, and 24 hours haven't elapsed. As I was saying, I'm worried that this, I'll put the camera back a bit, is not actually going to be enough, because I'm imagining something this for the finished size of the model, and I had particularly wanted to try working in this material because I had imagined roughly cutting the large cuboid that's going to be each floor, and then using the hot tool to sculpt these slightly curved, bulging, gibbous surfaces that are distinctive of the oldest timber-framed buildings. I don't think I want to buy more than one block of this, so I might have to think about my method. I didn't want to have to make individual walls. I wanted to carve down and then cut the inside out to make it hollow, which is a process that would have caused more waste perhaps than I can afford. But I'll think about that one some more. I've got to mention that this has also come with a ding out of it there. It's taken a whack from the delivery trolls. It's got on the very, very tip, you're not going to be able to see that, but on the very, very tip it does look crimped, but I think that's part of the design. Hopefully the hard plastic packaging has actually protected it from the violence done to it in transit. The second thing that happened was I saw something on Freegal, which is called Free Cycle in some places, and I've given away loads of stuff on Freegal over the years, never claimed anything, but I have been on the lookout for a long time now for a cardboard tube for an entirely different project. It's related to making, but it wasn't for this. And I saw this advert of somebody saying he had a tube from the inside of a roll of carpet, and he was, well, throw it away, he was giving it away on Pringles, and I went for it, and I went and collected it. The thing is, I didn't really think it through. I read that it was a 2-metre tube, and I read the diameter, but I didn't actually pace it out or measure it out to realise just how big that it is. This is it. It's flipping enormous. It's significantly taller than me, because that's what 2 metres is. It's that big. It's going to be too big for the project that I was thinking of you for. However, I have also been thinking about the Wizard's Tower that's going to be on the top of the timber frame buildings. You don't really get circular timber framed buildings. There's a castle in Germany that's got timber framed turrets on the top of it, but those castles of Mad Baron von Ludwig, whatever his name was, they're often confections. They're not real medieval structures. The thing about timber framing is you roughly straight, and so you build rectangles and cubes. You don't really build circular things with them. If you want, there's no need to make things that are timber framed circular. They're not strong towers that have got bombardment and square rectangular. They look wrong. However, there could be a Wizard's Tower built into the building. The timber frame building could be built up against a stone tower. Do I want to make one? We might just ignore that the enormous tube just fell over and probably damaged my wall for about the 4th time since I've owned it. Now, in the tabletop crafting groups on Facebook, it's a practice, a tradition, almost a trope, to make Wizard's Towers out of Pringles tubes. And I happen to have a Pringles tube because I found one with the Christmas food, and somebody had already started on it. So now it's mine. It's not going to make it to Christmas. The thing about that is they tend to get bits of foam or foam board, and cut out brick shapes and stick them round the outside. And sometimes it's done very well, and sometimes it's done rather poorly. But that is actually not the right scale for 28mm miniatures. If you put a figure about that size in one of these tubes, and imagine the floor space, your wizard would have about as much space as he'd have in his airing cupboard on each floor. And unless I suppose the usual thing will be to say, oh well, it's an interdimensional tower like the TARDIS, and the rooms are bigger inside than they appear on the outside. But having a big tube like that is tempting. Really want to make a building that looks like a stone building. It's a lot of extra work. It's a possibility. It's something that I'll think about as part of the project. And at this early stage, I don't need to make epic decisions about what to include and what to chuck out. Right, the third thing that's happened is ideas have been coming fast and furiously. Let's tell you what they are. I remembered something very important, which is footings. That might be not the proper word, but the footings are the solid row of something or other that the sill beam goes onto, and sill beams are the second things you are doing wrongly, because I've seen lots of models of timber frame buildings where people think the vertical beams go down into the ground. They don't. That happened in ancient and Anglo-Saxon buildings. Archaeologists detect where Anglo-Saxon buildings have been by post holes, but that tells you something. It tells you the posts rotted away and the buildings aren't there anymore. So they learned by the early Middle Ages that that is to say the 1066, 1485 Middle Ages, if you use that definition, they learned by that period that you need to put them on something, and they didn't build foundations for ordinary buildings. Even cathedrals didn't have foundations as deep as they later discovered they needed, but they did have a row of stone, and the stone was incredibly expensive, so it's sometimes only one row of stone. Sometimes it's 2, 3, or even 4. But not much more. Sometimes they put in more later if they put in nogging. And it's important to get that in, because the building doesn't look right without it. Wooden sill beam sitting on stone. You can't see them in most cases because the building's sunk into the ground, or there might be a nice cottage garden growing up along the front wall. Or these days, very often, it's all been painted black and somebody's injected modern. So that's the footings brickwork in, just to remind me to model it. And I've decided that it's thinking ahead to the future of this piece as something that one day hopefully will get exhibited in a gallery. I've decided it needs some descriptive text, so I'm going to have to think about in detail what actually happens on each floor of this amazing building, and I'm going to write it, and it'll be an extended label describing the fantasy story that's behind it. And there'll be a balcony along here, which will give me an opportunity for my washing line. They tend to be in these large, elaborate city buildings. On the biggest floor, the floor that has the largest jetty, and I have had an idea about how I'm going to get my cruck frame in. Now, a cruck frame building is often a more rustic sort of a timber frame building, but they're so beautiful. I want to get one in, and I'm going to talk to you about what they are and how they work. I thought, what if Wizard Oncewas had an elderly father who my camera packed up there because it's just a phone, and it was full of data, and yeah, full factory reset, and I lost a lot of settings and stuff. And meantime, Christmas has come and gone, thank goodness, because now I can get back to doing stuff, making stuff. Though I'm not really actually making yet, I'm still planning. I do lots of other creative things, a lot of writing at the moment for Dungeons and Dragons and Call of Cthulhu, and painting miniatures and what have you. But back to this. Wizard Oncewas has an elderly father, and his elderly father now needs a bit of care. He didn't want to give up his cruck-framed cottage in the countryside. So the wizard has teleported it here and stuck it on top of the building. And this is just a bit of paper stuck on there because I can't decide whether or not I want this little cottage on this level or even this level. It might be quite fun to have it sort of suspended up on piers and stilts or something, so it looks even more aerial. And this is a cruck framed cottage, and I had this idea before Christmas when the phone packed up, and I've only just this second remembered where I get the idea from of a sort of elderly grey bearded wizard who has an even more elderly grey bearded father, and that comes, I think, from something in the Belgariad by David Eddings, which is a fantasy series of novels that I read many years ago. decades ago, much recommended, but it comes as an interesting surprise when you find out that your elderly wizard, your Gandalf type, Merlin type character has got an even more ancient father still on the scene. And I like that idea, and I like the word. Wizard once was his wizard once was his father. We shall have to think of a name for him, but this is where he lives. In a little cottage that's going to look like that, but I don't know whether or not it'll go there, or maybe even here yet. And I'm still undecided about what's going to happen here with this bridge. There are competing ideas. This is how I work. Sometimes if you can't solve a problem, you can't decide, you walk away from it for a week, a month, a year, and work on other bits. Sometimes eventually you have to force yourself to decide, but it is not this day. I'm going to show you how a cruck framed house works. Now, this is where I go a bit bonkers, because I know that somewhere near here in this part of Warwickshire where I live, there is a fabulous example of a cruck framed house, and I see it must be more than once a year. Somehow in the places that I go and drive past, I see this beautiful little cruck framed cottage. But you'll have noticed I didn't take you there to show it to you in the first part of this video series. Why is that? Because I can't remember where it is, and I shall see it sooner or later, probably when I'm driving along, and I shall probably scream and cause an accident, driving me absolutely bonkers. So I'm going to have to tell you about them and show you some stills of buildings around the country. Here's the first thing to know about them. They have an interesting distribution. They are found down the sort of central strip of England, really, and over into Wales. They're not found very much in the southeast or in East Anglia, but in all of the areas, and there's an interesting correspondence, in all of the areas of England that are the more highland areas, and the areas that were used for pastoral farming as opposed to agrarian farming, though there's a lot of overlap and scatter in that. That's where the cruck framed houses are found. And this